If you're debt-free and you still feel one paycheck away from starting over, don't ignore that feeling. You thought paying off the debt would change something, that you'd finally breathe, that your next chapter could begin, but it didn't. People who end up back in debt don't get there because they're irresponsible. They get there because they confuse debt-free with financially safe. Negative $30,000 to zero isn't safety, it's neutral. You eliminated a threat, but you didn't build a financial buffer. So one slow month, one car repair, or one emergency, and you're right back in the hole, which means you only stopped halfway. I'll show you why people who do everything right end up back in debt and how to make sure you're not one of them. Years ago, I worked with a client, and 3 months after she paid off $28,000 in debt, she walked into our session and told me she opened a new credit card. Not because she needed the money, but because she felt untethered and directionless. She actually said, and I've never forgotten this, she needed something to fight. Now, if you're thinking this sounds insane, someone who just escaped debt voluntarily walking back into it, I want you to stick with me. She had spent 18 months paying off that $28,000. She was militant. She was disciplined. She was the kind of person who would send me screenshots of her zero balances like they were trophies. And for the first few weeks after that last payment, she felt incredible, like she had just won. But then a month passed, then 3 months passed, and she told me she noticed something strange. She was still checking her balance account like she was bracing for impact, still running the numbers at 11 p.m., and still feeling exposed. The reason someone with zero debt still feels one emergency away from disaster is that technically nothing had changed. Her account balance didn't go up when she paid off the debt. She just stopped owing. She eliminated a negative, so she was at zero. Zero has no shock absorption, but that's not even the most unsettling part. It was what she did next. She didn't just open a new card, she lit a fire she could see. Because without a threat to fight, she didn't know how to move. The only thing she ever knew was to run from danger. And when the danger disappeared, when the creditor stopped calling, when the balance hit zero, that freedom she felt in the beginning turned into feeling lost. So she created a new threat because she didn't plan ahead what needed to come after the payoff. If you've ever paid something off and found yourself right back where you started, or if you're debt-free right now and still feel like there's something off, you've probably been wondering, is this just how it is? Is it just me? It's not you. It's the gap that nobody talks about. I'm Q Felix. I teach personal finance for people who do everything right and still feel one emergency away from disaster. Here's what I've learned from watching client after client pay off debt, and some of them end up right back where they started. The problem isn't paying off the debt, it's what happens after. I call this the emergency gap, the space between I don't owe anyone and I can survive a hit. Most people think those are the same thing. They're not. Debt-free means you've stopped digging. It doesn't mean you've built anything. And the distance between zero and safe, between neutral and protected, is bigger than most people realize. Here's the thing though. Most financial advice makes this worse. They tell you to build an emergency fund first, before you even touch the debt. And mathematically, on a spreadsheet, that's correct. But here's what they ignore. Most people who are $30,000 in debt, or whatever the number is, don't have the emotional bandwidth to save $13,500 when the creditor is calling. That advice assumes you're a robot, and you're not. The reason most people do the human thing, which is to pay off the debt first, then save later, is because the threat is a more powerful motivator than the reward. That's simply biology. So let me show you the actual math. Let's say you make $6,000 a month after taxes. Your monthly expenses are $4,500, which means you've got $1,500 left over. That's what you use to pay down the debt, which is good. Now, the debt is gone, you're at zero. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. 3 to 6 months of expenses and liquid savings is what actually makes you safe, not invested. That money's not in a retirement account. It's liquid, it's cash. 3 months is $13,500. 6 months is $27,000. You just spent months, and for some of you, years, paying off $30,000 in debt. And now the math says you need to do it again. But this time, no one's on the other end. No lender, no collection call. And this is where most people make the mistake that sends them back into debt. They stop because they're exhausted and they think the job is done, but it's not done. The job just changed. There's no 8 p.m. phone call when you skip a month of paying yourself. There's no credit score drop. There's no consequence. The only consequence is the one that shows up when the transmission fails and you're still at zero. But here's where it gets interesting because it's not just about the numbers. There are two motivational systems in our brain. One runs on threat. That's the amygdala. Creditors calling, balances are due, you got a deadline. That system is incredibly powerful. It got you to pay off $30,000 of debt. The other system runs on reward. Dopamine, goal pursuit, building towards something. So here's what most people never see coming. When the debt disappears, the threat system shuts off. The amygdala goes quiet. And unless you deliberately build the reward system, nothing takes its place. You don't magically switch from I have to fix something to I'm building my future. You just stop. The worst possible thing you could do after paying off debt is to assume that motivation will just take over. It won't. Researchers call this the difference between avoidance motivation and approach motivation. Avoidance is sprinting away from a fire. Approach is running towards something you want. They use completely different neural circuits. When the fire goes out, the sprinting stops, whether you've reached safety or not. And this is exactly what happened with my client and with many of you in a similar situation. She wasn't undisciplined and she wasn't irresponsible. She had just run a marathon for 18 months and she thought she had finally crossed the finish line. But her brain only had one engine, the threat engine. When the creditors stopped calling, her amygdala went quiet and she felt empty and directionless. So she lit another fire. She opened a new credit card and she gave herself something else to fight. So if you're wondering, how do I make sure this doesn't happen to me? The answer isn't more discipline. The answer is building a second engine, one that runs on progress, not panic. Here's exactly what I had her do. 3 steps. Name it, number it, deadline it. Step 1, name the account. You can call it emergency fund, emergency buffer, it doesn't matter. Just name it. There's actual neuroscience behind this. When you label a goal with a specific name, you activate the prefrontal cortex differently than if you just think, I'll save more. This is called the generation effect. Information that you create yourself is stickier than information you receive. A named account becomes a target, and your brain treats named targets differently than vague intentions. Okay, so naming the account gets you started. But there's a second problem that most people hit right after. They name the account and then do nothing with it. They know what they're building toward, but not how far away it is. And that's where most buffer building attempts die. Step 2, the account has to be specific. Not 3 to 6 months. Pick one number, $13,500, $20,000, whatever your 3-month expense number is. The reason vague goals fail isn't because you're lazy. It's because your brain can't measure progress against a blurry target. Specificity triggers dopamine the closer you get to your goal. And dopamine is what keeps the approach engine running without needing a fire. Now, step 3 is the one most people skip. And that's the difference between finishing and staying stuck forever. Step 3 is the deadline. Remember this, an emergency fund isn't a portfolio. Once you hit that number, you stop. Without a deadline, that buffer becomes infinite. And infinite goals don't get finished, they get abandoned. Now, here's the part that should change how you see this whole thing. You already proved that you can sustain a payment for however many months or years, however long it took you to pay off the debt. The difference is that this time the balance goes up instead of down. Same discipline, but instead of dread every single time you check the account, you see progress. And progress is fuel that the threat system can't produce. So that covers the mechanics. But there's a bigger reason all of this matters, and it has nothing to do with your savings account. We treat debt payoff like it's the finish line, and it's not. It's just halftime. The first half was eliminating the threat, and you did that. And the second half is much harder. Not because the math is harder, but because the accountability is invisible. Nobody's watching, nobody's calling. It's just you and a number that has to keep going up. The mistake most people make is celebrating at the halftime and never coming back to finish the second half. If you don't close this gap, the debt will come back. Again, not because you're irresponsible, but because you didn't build an engine that runs on anything other than fear. When my client went back into debt, I kept asking myself why. Then it clicked. She never spent a day building protection. She never protected herself. And once she started protecting the person instead of the numbers, everything changed for her. It's the same with you. Your savings account, your portfolio, your net worth, those are all assets, but they're not the primary asset. You are the primary asset. It's your earning capacity, your cognitive function, your energy, your ability to show up and produce. That's the asset that pays for everything else. When you're living at zero, even debt-free zero, you're not investing in the primary asset. You're just maintaining it, and barely. One emergency and the primary asset takes damage. You can't work the same, you can't think clearly, you can't perform. The worst thing you can do as the primary asset is to leave it unprotected. A financial buffer isn't just money in the bank, it's armor. It's what keeps you earning, building, competing, even when life happens. If you're debt-free and still feel one paycheck away from disaster, the emergency gap is real. The math is simple. The fix isn't motivation. It's a named account, a specific number, and a deadline. A system that runs whether you feel like it or not. The point was never just getting to zero. It was protecting the asset that got you there, you. I break down these systems in every video. If that sounds like something you want more of, hit the subscribe button.